Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about how to rock your next PowerPoint presentation. A little bit about me. My name is Alison Bell. I'm the head of people and community at Founders Live. And one of the things that I do is I teach entrepreneurs and startup founders how to tell great stories so they can get investment for their idea or their company. So some fun facts about me. So I'm a Jeep owner. I love adventures and I love the outdoors. I have an adorable little bulldog that comes everywhere with me. People tell me I'm a fun conversationalist. And my proudest accomplishment was going from the world's worst driver to actually being a professional Baja racer. So when I started driving, just to give you a background on how bad I was, the first time I borrowed my parents' car, not only did I ding up their car, I actually took out their two-door garage as well. And that is how I started off my driving career. 6 months later, I got a ticket. And when I was leaving the driving course that I took, the lady paused before she gave me my certification and said, "Allison, of everybody here, when I say drive safe, I mean it." Everyone laughed, and I go to leave the parking lot, and I literally backed into a car. That's only I could probably go on for days about how many car accidents I was in. So fast forward to 2008, I decided to take off and go to California. I told myself I was going to make this 2-week vacation last as long as I can. I'm happy to say I made it last 9 months. I'm even prouder to say I became a professional Baja racer. Vroom, 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 vroom. Yes, off-road Baja racing. Now, I obviously was not a great driver, but I made it based on my personality. I made the team. And I told myself, all I need to do is just fake it. I just need to lie to myself and tell myself I'm a great driver. And that way, I will make it. So I trained every weekend down in Mexico. And sure enough, after 2 months of training, my manager asked me to do the hardest 70 miles of the Baja 250. Was I scared? Yes. Now, I'd love to say that I did it flawlessly and it was great. But unfortunately, 5 miles into my actual concourse, my part of the concourse, I actually crashed. Now, I was riding this quad that was 500 pounds. I had to figure out how to flip it back over on my own, get it started, and get back on the road. But luckily, I crashed the day before, so I thought back, what did the guys do to get us started? And sure enough, I got that part going. So it was, I'm like, great. Now it's just my leg that was crushed by 500 pounds. But luckily, I grew up on a farm, and we would always, anytime a sheep would break their leg, we would make a splint. So I grabbed 2 pieces of wood, and I had a whole thing of duct tape in my backpack just in case something like this happened. I duct taped my leg up. I used the whole entire roll, and I told myself I just need to do the next 65 miles, and I'll be good. And that's what I did. And when I was done, I knew I could do anything that I put my mind to do. And I think that ties in well with Toastmasters. When I was recommended to join Toastmasters, I knew that it might be hard. I might not want to give a presentation, but I would never die doing it. So I joined Toastmasters. And here I am today. Everybody's heard the death by PowerPoint. And if you ask me, that'd be a horrible way to die. So if you think about most people when they present, it's kind of like the yellow book, the old yellow book. For all you Gen Zers, you probably don't even know what that is. But we used to look up phone numbers in this book. Well, when you're an experienced Toastmaster presentation, it's like using Google. It's dynamic. It's fun. And I really want to get everybody that's listening to this presentation some good tips on how to do that. Why are PowerPoint presentations so boring? I think there's a number of reasons. I think a lot of it is learned while we're in school. Obviously, teachers don't have to make PowerPoint engaging. I mean, they should, but they don't necessarily have to. They do it every day. And students are going to learn the stuff regardless of if it's engaging or not, because they have to pass the course. But when you're in a presentation and you're presenting to investors or you're presenting to your coworkers or your boss, you really need to sell them. And it is your job to make it not boring. So for this presentation, I came up with the 10 commandments to rock your next PowerPoint presentation. Number 1, thou shalt not bore people. I think pictures make a big difference. You can just pull up a funny picture and that will always make it a little bit more entertaining. It'll make it a better experience. I tell my startup founders all the time to avoid too many stats and graphs. Of course, they're necessary sometimes, but don't lead with that. Lead with a story. And have fun with it. You have this stage where you can actually share your story, share your information, share your wisdom. So it's a time where you should be happy and excited to do so. Be creative. I think that every good presentation should have, people should be creative, find a different way of doing so. So that way it's not so boring or like everybody else's presentation. And lastly, put yourself in their shoes. Would you want to listen to the presentation that you're creating? You should always think about your audience. Put them at the forefront. Put them at the center of everything you do and make sure it's a good experience for them. Embrace the pause and slow down. This is probably one of my biggest challenges when I speak, but it's also, I think, the area that most people would benefit from. First off, the pause gives you time to breathe, which is incredibly important. I used to go through presentations and I would literally run out of breath because I wouldn't take any pauses. So when you're done with a sentence, take a moment and pause and then keep on the rest of your presentation. Ryan Every, which is one of the best speakers in the world, he actually won the World Championship of Toastmasters, public speaking. He told me, when you're practicing a speech, don't write it in a paragraph form. Write it in a poem form. And what that allows you to do is when you're practicing it, you'll learn it in a way with a cadence. When you're saying a poem, you don't just read through the whole thing, you have pauses in there. So I think that's probably been one of the most helpful, tips that I ever heard about how to memorize a speech or how to incorporate the pause. I literally write out pause after every sentence so that way I don't forget about it. So a pause draws the audience in. When you start your presentation, this is more for when you're in person, but when you walk up to the stage or your boardroom or wherever you're at, take a moment, pick one person, look them in the eyes for 3 seconds, and then center yourself and then start speaking. It shows that you're in control, that you're confident, and it makes them wonder like, oh, what's happening? So it draws them in. Slowing your tempo makes for a better impact. If you speak really fast all the time like this, people can't keep up with it. They don't have time to digest it. So by simply slowing your tempo, it gives people enough time to actually grasp what you're saying. And in the pause, it lets it set in. Engage your audience. It should be a two-way conversation. Obviously, when you're in a webinar like this, it makes it a lot harder to engage with your audience. I can't see your eyes, but you should still make it a two-way conversation. You should make it so that you can actually, if you have the opportunity to ask questions, and if you have the ability to bring your audience into the actual presentation, that's great. And eye contact is key. So in Toastmasters, you're taught to spend 3 to 5 seconds looking at one person in the audience and then move on to the next. And you should probably do a sweep of the whole entire room throughout your whole speech so nobody feels left out. So I think that's really helpful to make a presentation more engaging and makes the audience feel like they're a part of it. Thou shalt tell great stories. So just like when I started this presentation, I told a story. It gave people a chance to get to know me, connect with me, learn about how horrible a driver I am. And I also made a point with it. I talked about how it's relevant to Toastmasters and how, yeah, was I scared to make my first speech? Absolutely. Was I scared to make my next 20 speeches? Yes, absolutely. But slowly but surely, I got more comfortable with Toastmasters. So what should you talk about? Your failures are probably one of the biggest things. It makes you human, it's humbling, and people can also learn from your mistakes. So talk about your failures. Lessons learned. These are like those aha moments. Those are always great stories. Your family, another great source of stories. Make sure to put them on a pedestal. If this is not a time to ever say anything bad about your family, keep it positive. The only person you should be talking about your failures is yourself, not others. Don't always make yourself the hero. Because if every story you're the hero, first off, it becomes, you're not being vulnerable. You're not showing who you really are. You're not being authentic. And everyone knows that you can't always be the hero. So try to avoid always making yourself the hero of every story. You should make the other person the hero. And there's really never a bad time to tell a story. So I do sales also, and I feel like the only reason I'm good at sales is because I tell great stories. It really allows people to connect with you. The reason that biologically we are so inclined to learn through stories is that's how we used to learn. If you think about it, when we're back in caveman times, people would gather around the fire and the elders would pass down stories. That's how they'd find out about what the dangers are, or saber-toothed tigers, how dangerous they are, or that's how we learn from the beginning of time. So our body is at a biological level more receptive to learning through stories. Speaking with confidence. So before every time I present, I spend 2 minutes in a power pose. I do it before this presentation, and I do it before every presentation. I tell people to do it before an interview. There's actually evidence that shows, I think it was Stanford University came out with this study that actually looked at, they had 2 groups of people. One group just they actually would sit there for right before the interview question. They sat with their arms closed, and I think sitting in a chair. And the other half, for 2 minutes, got to stand in a power pose. And I think it was 95% of those that stood in a power pose came off as more confident and were more likely to get the job offer. So even if you're not confident, fake it. Just take 2 minutes, give yourself some good positive self-talk. Tell yourself you're gonna rock it. See yourself finishing the presentation and doing well. Because the number one reason people are nervous, it's their own self-talk. They tell themselves, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I'm gonna do bad. What about if I stumble? What about if I forget my lines? And all that does, it creates anxiety. Now, if you wanna look less confident, fill your body with all the hormones and cortisone that will definitely make you more anxious. When you're anxious, you're not confident, and you're more likely to make a mistake. If you sit there telling yourself, oh, I'm gonna forget my words. Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then it actually happens, well, of course, you are pre-setting your mind to do that. You're telling yourself to do that. So instead, spend some time before every presentation. You can go in the bathroom, You can put on some music and tell yourself you're going to do great. And all that positive self-talk works. I did it before this presentation, and I will always do it before any time when I speak in front of people. And I think it's important that people should become aware of what stories they're telling themselves. I used to do it. I used to tell myself, I'm just not a good speaker. So in grad school, I was actually the worst presenter in my entire class. Every time after I would speak, people would ask me, why do you suck so badly? And I'd be like, I don't know, I'm just not good at speaking. And this kept on. That was in grad school was the first time my teacher approached me and said, Alison, you really need to go Toastmasters. Now, I wish I would have taken her advice then and would have joined then. So that would have been 10 years that I would have been in Toastmasters now. I probably would have already given a TED Talk. But I waited another 4 years before actually joining Toastmasters. Thou shalt not use a font smaller than 30. The reason being is people try to cram too many words onto their slides. It really should be put pictures. That same teacher that recommended I go to Toastmasters one time, we had a weekend format where I'd go to school once a month for a weekend. And I would always speak last because I hated speaking, so I'd always go on Sunday. So my teacher decided to throw me a curveball. On Saturday, she told me that, Alison, you're up. What? I looked at her. I'm up? It's Saturday. I have no words on my PowerPoint presentation. She said, great. You'll probably do better than you ever done. So sure enough, I go up and I give the presentation. So instead of focusing on trying to say it verbatim right or trying to read it, I would just have a picture come up and I could just tell a story or I would talk about the picture. So PowerPoint really then became more of an aid. It would prompt me, okay, this is what you're going to talk about next, instead of me being focused on the words. Another thing that happens, if you put a ton of words, people that are listening to you or trying to listen to you, they're going to naturally be inclined to try and read the words. And that's a big distraction from actually what you're saying. So you don't need to put everything that you're going to say onto your PowerPoints. So if you use anything smaller than 30, you'll get in the habit. But all my whole entire presentation has a font of 30 or larger. And it makes it so that it's simple. I love the KISS model. Keep it simple, stupid. So definitely rely on pictures. I think that pictures are much more engaging anyhow. Thou shalt make slides that are visually appetizing. I think this is important. People, we're visual learners. If you're going to have something that's going to add to your presentation, which every PowerPoint should be adding something of value, should put some really fun, bright colors in there. How I do it is I use PowerPoint. I usually do pick a theme. And now PowerPoint is awesome. When you add a picture in, it will give you a choice of different variations of the slide so that it looks nice. It doesn't look exactly the same, but it does put it all together for you so you don't have to worry about all the formatting. I noticed that last year and I was like, wow, that's a great feature. So I encourage everybody to check it out. It definitely makes for a better looking slide. Your nonverbals. So this is a big slide. There's so many things that come into play. Now, of course, when you're talking about body language, eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, posture, on Zoom, it's a little bit harder, but you still gotta keep these things in mind. Now, in person, you definitely have more to think about. One thing that I would always do is I would stand unbalanced. I still sometimes do, I'll be quite honest. I probably swayed a little bit in this presentation. But you want to, in a perfect world, you want to ground yourself, put your 2 feet, plant them right, like hip width apart. Take your hands. You either want them to be, you don't want them to be back your body. You don't want them to be clasped together. You usually want to have them at the base of right around where your navel is. Or you can have them laying by your side. And then with deliberate thought, you should use them to amplify your message instead of just having them be all over the place when you're talking. Now, all these things come with practice. We already talked about eye contact, facial expressions. I used to always just smile. That's kind of like my default expressions. Well, it's not always the right time to smile. Of course, it's warm and welcoming, but if you're telling a really sad story and you're like, it doesn't flow. So there's a time to be more reserved. There's a time where you should smile. There's a time where like you should express the emotion that you want your audience to actually be experiencing. Gestures. People either make them too big or they either make them all over the place or they kind of don't make them at all. I think that on Zoom, since we're all living this weird time where everybody's on Zoom all the time, we should really go out of our way to actually make sure that you can see them on the screen. So use your hands more. But generally speaking, when you're in person, which we will go back to being in person at some point, should make sure that your gestures are planned out and that you're aware of them. And like I said, great posture does a lot for you. It gives you'll have more air. When you're standing up tall, you sound more confident, you are more confident, and you're actually able to take in more oxygen. So when you're crouched down, you just don't have the capacity to have that full breath of lungs. So stand up tall. It'll make you look taller, it'll make you look skinnier, and it'll make you look more confident, and you'll present better. Thou should be Zoom ready. Lighting is really critical. Now, you don't have to go out and buy an expensive light. I mean, I did buy a light that was probably like $20, but I'm on Zoom all the time. But if you don't have a light and it's daytime, simply face towards a window and get some natural light. Or if you can go outside, you'll always have the best lighting through natural lights. Backgrounds matter. So usually on Zoom, you can actually pick your own background. So I usually go with a very bright background. You don't want something too busy. If you don't have the ability to create your own background or use one of their virtual backgrounds, make sure that it's a clean background. Or like I am in a soundproof room and I simply have a gray background, so it's not distracting. Now, I can tell you lots of stories when I was a recruiter and I had my candidates. Some of them were younger than others. I mean, I literally had candidates that one time had a bong in the background. Of course, he didn't get the job, and it wasn't just because of that. He didn't get the job because of the great lack of self-awareness. But you want to be careful. If you have, make sure it's clean, tidy, it's not distracting. Because just like when your slides can be distracting, your background can be incredibly distracting. So everyone says dress to impress. Now, if you're going to a job interview, absolutely wear a suit. I always think it's better to dress up than dress down. So of course I'm wearing a suit. But if you know who your audience is going to be, it's sometimes best just to dress to relate. Be at their level. Typically when you're presenting to your peers or you're presenting to a audience, if you dress to kind of mirror them, it's typically a wise way to go. And like I said, you got to exaggerate your nonverbals when you're on Zoom. You got to show more energy. People say I do really well speaking on Zoom because I'm naturally more expressive. So you can't really get the full sense of your body language since there's a screen this big. So you kind of got to make the most of that screen. So be more energetic, be more enthusiastic will typically convey that through the screen. Practice, practice, practice. So if you think about professional sports players, they started practicing when they were little kids. They played in high school. They played in college. Well, the same thing for speaking. The more you practice, the better you will be. Toastmasters is perfect for that. Now, don't think that you'll join Toastmasters and within a year you'll be a perfect presenter. But you will get the opportunity to practice your speaking and you'll get feedback, which is really key. Something I found to be really useful is that I record every time I speak in front of an audience or I speak while I'm just practicing, I will record myself speaking. There's no better person to give yourself feedback than you. I remember one time I listened to a speech I gave. It was a 14-minute speech. And I said, so, 59 times. And so. It was so distracting. But after I did that, which made it worse, is I decided to listen to it with my boss, who was a extremely great salesperson and extremely well-spoken person. And to listen to that 15 minutes of just saying so. I probably now when Toastmaster, they count how many so's, likes, or filler words you use. I usually have maybe one or two so's, but never again did I have 59 so's. I have to say the best decision I ever made was to join Toastmasters. My teacher told me I needed to go. The time where I really realized that I had to join Toastmasters was I went to this, I guess you call it like a career development group. It was sponsored by At Work Arizona, and I was doing it because they were going to pay for my certification in HR. And everyone looked up at me. I had an HR degree. I had a master's. Every day I just rocked every single assignment that was due until I had my elevator pitch. After the elevator pitch, people walked up to me like, Allison, we thought you would do far better than that. They're like, what happened? And I was like, ugh. And then they told me, Allison, you should really go to Toastmasters. Now, once again, I wish I would have gone to Toastmasters at that point. But in my mind, I said, no, you know what? I did look it up. I looked up a meeting. I lived downtown at the time, and there was only one meeting, and it was an advanced club. So I told myself, all right, well, I'll find another club, and I'll start going to it someday. Luckily, that someday happened when my bosses were listening to me speak one day when we were doing this vision. It was like a vision experience where we would all go around circles saying what our vision for the company was. And one of my bosses said, Allison, you have such great ideas. They're like VP level ideas, but it doesn't come across like that. He's like, what would you say would you mind going to Toastmasters? At that point, I said, no, I'd love to. And the very next day, I signed up for Toastmasters. That was back in February of 2017. And I've been going ever since then. I've been a part of 3 groups. I've even started my own group. And now that I run a company, I'm absolutely starting a new group for all these entrepreneurs where I'm going to teach them how to tell great stories. So if there's one thing, if you're young in your career, it's a must. If you're mid-career and you want to advance in your career, it's a must. I really don't think that there's anybody that wouldn't benefit from Toastmasters. If you're a great speaker, awesome. You'll become even better speaker. If you're really shy and don't like interacting with people, great. Now's the time to join Toastmasters because it's on Zoom. It'll be a lot easier than having to do it in person. They say the number one thing that you can do for your career, the number one skill that will determine your worth is the ability to speak in front of people. So if you think about most high-paying jobs, or if you think about professional speakers, how much they make, the ability to translate your ideas to your audience in a way that's meaningful and impactful is the number one skill that is lacking in organizations today. People always ask me, like, oh, what can I do to advance my career? I'm a mentor at ASU. And people always say, what can I do? And I say, join Toastmasters. It will be the best thing you ever did for your career, for your personal life. Just learning how to give feedback is key. I know that now I actually give feedback to my CEO, and it's not easy. It's definitely probably one of the most challenging things I have to do for work. But if I would have never joined Toastmasters, by no means would I ever know how to give my boss feedback. It's one of those skills that your employees, or even you have a friend, let's say your friend does something, or you know they probably would benefit from some advice. It's a touchy subject, how to give feedback in a positive way. And Toastmasters, you'll learn that. Now, I do want to set some proper expectations. But first, I want to tell you a story. When I was a little kid, I grew up on a farm. And we had some lambs that didn't have a mother. I think their mother died giving birth. So I had this one lamb named Jumper. I would wake up every morning at 5:30 in the morning to go bottle feed. And as he got older, I would walk him around. I mean, this lamb wasn't just a lamb. It was my pet. I loved Jumper. Every day when I came back from school, I would run and go see Jumper. Now let's fast forward like 4 months. Jumper is probably 45 pounds, maybe 50 pounds. One day, I got home from school, and I went to the barn. I looked everywhere. Jumper, where are you, Jumper? Jumper was nowhere to be found. At the time, I was 7, and I walked back to my house, and I asked my parents, Mom, Dad, where's Jumper? I can't find him anywhere. My parents told me Jumper jumped away. That night, we were having lamb chops. Granted, I was a really gullible I'm still pretty gullible, but back then I was especially gullible. But as I was taking that last bite of my lamb chop, I felt something in my stomach. And I looked at my parents, I'm like, can I excuse myself? I went upstairs and I cried. First off, I realized I just ate my pet lamb. When at 7, that's really traumatic. Second of all, I was like, how dumb do my parents think I am? And then third, I was like, wow, my parents are lying to me? This is horrible. So that was a dark day for me as a 7-year-old. So the next day, I decided to confront my parents. Mom, Dad, I think you fed me my pet lamb. Of course, they said, no, we would never do such a thing. They're like, what kind of parents do you think we are? They're like, see, we always trade meat with the neighbors so that we were never eating our own pets. Well, first off, Mom, Dad, there was another sheep farm within 100 miles of us, so I could definitely know they were lying to me. And because of that, I actually quit eating meat for 15 years. Now, all of this could have been avoided if my parents would have simply set proper expectations with me. If they would have just sat down and said, Allison, one day we're going to eat this. I've been like, oh, okay, no big deal. But instead, for the next 15 years, I didn't eat meat. It's kind of funny, but when I was 30, I went by my parents' house and there were some lamb chops. And I kind of just grabbed my fork and grabbed a bite. As I'm like about to put it in my mouth, my brother, my parents, everybody's just holding their breath. And I take a bite and I finish it and I swallow. Mom, Dad, it's been 20 years. I'm over it. But now for any of you that have kids or plan on having kids, my advice to you is if you let a kid name it, don't beat it to them. But the real moral of the story is setting proper expectations is always an important thing to do. So I'm going to set proper expectations about what to expect in Toastmasters. Will it be overnight that you're going to learn how to speak well? No. Are you going to be, is it still going to be nerve-wracking? Probably for several years. Even to this day, last night I was practicing this presentation and I was telling myself, oh gosh, why did I even sign up for this? I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm so nervous. But good thing today, right before, I was like, wow, I don't feel nervous. This is a great feeling. But it's been almost 4 years that I'm in Toastmasters. So don't expect anything to happen overnight. And it does take time. When you first start writing your speeches, yeah, it's going to take time out of your day to actually write a speech, to practice it, and put the time into actually becoming a better speaker. It's not like by just showing up to Toastmasters one day, you'll give a TED Talk. It's by showing up, putting the time in, and actually learning how to write a speech, how to deliver a speech, how to take in feedback. These things are all things that, took time. And you can all the presenters today that you've seen, they've been in Toastmasters for a long time. None of us were probably gifted as great speakers. Sure, some people do have an easier time speaking in front of people than others. But if you ask most of them, they weren't great when they started. I was horrible when I started. But over time, you get better. And it's about incremental changes and putting in the time to actually learn how to speak well in front of people. Do I have any questions or comments or anything? And then for any of you guys, I will come back into the screen, but connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me or you can text me. And I want to thank all of you guys for showing up. But if you guys have any comments or any feedback or questions. Thank you, Holland. It was great hearing you as well. Oh, the third commandment. Not sure. I would have to go back into the speech. I don't know off the top of my head which one is the third one. I would have to look it up. You guys will all have access to the screen, to the PowerPoint. I do believe so. Thanks, Peter. So I don't have too much more. Sorry it wasn't long enough, but that's kind of like what I had to say about stories. If there is anything else, I will say have a great day. If you want to hear more stories, reach out to me. I always like having great conversations with people. Oh, how do we construct a story? Oh, perfect question. Yes, absolutely. So constructing a story, I think that depends on what your story is, but I like to relive it. Like I like to take people through like the whole emotions of it. Now there's lots of, I would say Ryan Every is a great person to look up and he's really good at telling stories. But how I construct stories is I look at how much time I have to actually devote to that story. And then I think it's really good to put a build up, like how you felt, how, the things you smelled, the things you saw, and kind of like walk them through as if you're there so they can relive it with you. So I think those are some really great advice I had about stories. Another thing is when you're telling a story, you don't have to tell the whole story. Tell what's relevant to your audience. You don't need to get caught up on the details. If you don't remember the person's name, make up a name. If you don't remember some minor things, or if it doesn't add to the story, leave it out. It's okay. You're not a liar because you didn't tell the whole story. When I would do interview preps with candidates, I tell them, look, I'm not telling you to lie during your interviews. I'm telling you that if it's not adding to your story, if it's not bringing value, then you don't need to put it in. So be deliberate about what you say. Like sometimes when I tell the Baja story, I don't talk about how I, crashed. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on the situation. But you really want to, like, the story is meant to drive home the point. So like the one with the lamb, I tell that one that way. There's probably a million other details I could have added to that, but I kind of picked those that are most relevant to the audience and the point that I'm trying to make. Is there any other questions? Oh, should we put our stories on our social media profiles? Yes. Okay, that's a great question. So I do. I encourage it. So if you look at my LinkedIn, obviously, depends on what the story is. I think it's great when people put in their story. I try to put as much personality and personal kind of stuff. Like, obviously, be mindful of what you put, but I put on my resume that I did the Baja racing thing. And when I go to an interview, that's the first thing, the only thing people want to know about. They say, tell me about the Baja story. So absolutely. I think that if you have a good story, yeah, people want to hear that. I was actually giving advice to one of my fellow Toastmasters. We went hiking together last weekend, and he's a great speaker. And he told me, that, Alison, I got my doctorate now. Like, how can I better make my profile, my LinkedIn, be more meaningful? I was like, tell a story. You're a great storyteller. Absolutely. He actually competed at the district level on a competition. And I told him, like, he should just post that story up on his on the featured section of LinkedIn. Yes, so I would say definitely put on your social media profiles if it makes sense. Any other questions? I guess if you look up, let me see what the third one is. The third commandment is engage the audience is the third one. So that would be the third one. Any other questions? Well, on that note, I will say thank you for listening. Thank you, Toastmasters, for this opportunity. And I truly appreciate it. And it was a great feeling to walk into a speech and not be nervous. So thank you for that as well.